and struggled to find purchase. Every time their defiance arose, it was quickly crushed as flame units closed in and burned away all resistance. Heavy bolters, autocannons, and missile launchers maintained a dense hail of fire from the high ground and embedded gun emplacements on the walls. One ridge line exploded as a Death Guard plasma cannon section managed to retaliate, killing several Drakes. But the Salamander heavies were dug in well and survived. As the Death Guard cannons moved up for a second barrage, they were swallowed by a lava trench that yawned open beneath them. Other legionaries, clad in scorched white plate, were blinded by erupting steam vents, only to be cut down by the host of implacable fire drakes. Even with its scaled denizens fought off and now quiescent, the Earth itself still seemed to rebel against the invaders. The deadly unpredictability of the terrain eventually began to tell, and as the Death Guard's superior numbers dwindled and the Salamanders continued to carve them up piecemeal, Nomus Ritan led his veterans to their rival command section. But it was Numeon who caught the gaze of their leader across the fierce melee. Lesteigen felt his fragile grip on Nocturne weakening. In his mind's eye, he saw his banner in tatters, faded in ignominy. Then he railed against it. None had fought as hard as he. Death and defeat had risen to try and claim him over and over again, but he had resisted. He would resist it again now. I will be remembered, he thought, striding across the bitter, choking sand plain. On this rancid world, I shall make an indelible mark in history. As he took a slatted view of the carnage through his visor, Lesteigen realized there was no subtlety to this fight, that fine tactics would not win the field. It had become a dirty scrum, a brutal close-quarter engagement. This style of warfare he knew. He had fought it his entire existence. Behind the mask of his war helm, Lesteigen smiled. He could see their leader, the draconic officer clad in scales, cutting down warriors like they were little more than wooden staves. There, he called to his Terminator veterans. That one! Numeon was well aware that Barbarans were lauded for their resilience, but even the sons of Mortarion could not withstand the beating they had just taken and hope to hold their ground against an equally tenacious enemy. Across the field of battle, the Salamanders crushed what remained of the Death Guard's resistance, until only its warlord and his loyal warriors were left. Nomus Ritan bellowed like an Ur-Drake as fire drakes met Death Guard Terminators. The clash was brutal, and veteran warriors fell on either side in the first few seconds of the fighting. Thunderhammers broke nigh on inviolable warplate apart as the Salamanders bludgeoned their enemies implacably. For their part, the Death Guard cleaved and stabbed with lightning claws. One Drake was felled by a power fist, only for his killer to die under a hail of retaliatory blows. As the brutal skirmish unfolded, Ritan and a clutch of warriors were drawn into combat against a Contemptor. Even Zetos had been pushed out of position by the lethal ebb and flow of the fight. It left Numeon alone to face the Death Guard warlord. As he met him across the corpse-strewn, wreckage-choked terrain, the Barbaran called out, "Are you the prophet? The one I chased across the storm?" He was bleeding from a dozen rents in his armor and snarled with rad-scarred lips, his war helm long gone. His retainers were almost finished, dispatched by Ritan's fire drakes as the Lord Chaplain himself took apart the last dreadnought. "To you, I am the ender of all things," said Numeon. Drokoros had bitten deep of the Death Guard, and though he was weary, the pyre captain knew this was the one he had to kill. The Death Guard scoffed as if he could reverse fate. His blade was slick with the blood of Numeon's brothers. Numeon would ensure this fetid wretch would anoint it no further. "You should not have come here. It was an error. You lost your claim on my life when you let us slip through your dirty fingers, traitor. Look around you," he invited. There were but he and Numeon on this part of the field. Scores of bodies surrounded them, mostly clad in begrimed white. Numeon glanced at the fire drakes about to encroach, warning them off. This was his enemy to kill. The Barbaran appeared unfazed by his sudden shift in fortune. He actually laughed, then formed an ugly grin through decayed teeth. "Know my name, Drake," he said, as if about to claim conquest for Barbarus. "He who has set foot upon your soil, who has brought death to Nocturne, who will claim the head of your lord and father. Remember it. I am Malig Les." Drokoros thrust into the traitor's neck, silencing anything further. As Numeon wrenched the sword free, the Death Guard dropped his blade, a chipped but sharp kukra, and tried to staunch the bleeding. Numeon cut off his head. "No one will remember you, traitor, least of all me." A bloodied Zetos joined Numeon on the battlefield as he cleaned his sword. As they clasped forearms, he swung his thunderhammer onto his shoulder. "Feels good to purge Nocturnian soil," he said, looking around at the carnage. His gaze lingered on the headless corpse of the Death Guard warlord, but only fleetingly. "And the desert will take their corpses." Zetos smiled ruefully. "Zathen would have relished this battle. He, Varkir, and everyone we have lost to get this far will be remembered. In Vulcan's name. Aye, in Vulcan's name." With the defeat of their leader, the Death Guard were in full retreat. Ritan emerged from the slowly dissipating smoke. Like the others, his armor was battered, but his spirit soaring. "It seems Nocturne is quiescent once more," he told them both. "What of the Reaper's Shroud?" asked Numeon. "Warships are inbound from Prometheus, Vulcan's wrath, and the Drake Lord to ensure Nocturne's skies are ours again." "Then there is but one task remaining," said Numeon, as his eyes fell upon the forbidding Mount Deathfire. "Vulcan's resurrection." Ritan watched Numeon for a few moments before he began walking away. "Brother Captain," he called, "after you have cleansed your war plate and weapons, come and speak with me. I said there would be time for talk. That time is upon us." Aboard the Reaper's Shroud, the alien sirens had reached a fever pitch. Fires ran rampant through the ship. Its shields were down, and according to its augurs, 2 strike cruiser-class vessels were inbound from the Prometheus moon, where they had been docked. No hierarchy remained. No order existed. Only chaos. The last 2 Death Guard legionaries lay dead on the bridge, the blood from their torn throats and bodies still pooling. Inexplicably, their battle plate had provided no defense against the knife. It had cut them open as if they wore nothing but cloth instead of hardy adamantium and ceramite. None amongst the crew had dared stand in the preacher's way after that, and he had said nothing as he left. The only evidence of his existence was the absence of a ship taken from one of the few launch bays that still functioned. Its destination was unknown to everyone save its pilot. But as he flew the diminutive ship, Kor Galek praised Lorgar for his deliverance and the powers of ruin for the sliver of fulgurite still in his possession. Chapter 66. Into the Fire. Nocturne, the Draconious Gate, Vault. Nomus Ritan waited in shadows, a flickering fire the only light in the humble vault. He stood before Vulcan's casket, his eyes closed as if deep in thought or mourning. Lord Chaplain, Numeon's voice ventured from the darkness. "Stand with me, brother," said Ritan, his tone solemn. Numeon did as asked. "Tell me, Artellus, what do you see in that casket that others do not?" "I see my father and the potential for his return." "Why? Because you want it to be so? You need it?" "Because it is. I believe it." "You were equerry to our Primarch, arguably his closest confidant in the Legion, and sworn to protect him." Numeon turned, frowning. "Are you saying I failed him?" "I am saying you may feel guilty for his death. I am saying your grief for his passing is probably more acute than any son of Nocturne. It does not surprise me that you cling to the belief in his resurrection." "I cling to nothing. I know Vulcan will rise. I can feel it. Does the Promethean Creed not preach rebirth? What of the Circle of Fire?" "It refers to spiritual rebirth, Numeon. As one is given up to the earth, only then can another rise. It is figurative. You are Vulcan reborn. In you, in us, are his teachings made immortal, his wisdom sacrosanct." "Perhaps in such secular times that was true. But in ancient days, could the Circle of Fire have referred to true resurrection? Our father is immortal, after all." "Myths, brother, from a dark age of blood sacrifice that Vulcan himself put asunder." "And what era is this, then, if not a dark age, where more than blood is sacrificed?" Ritan sighed. "What did Varkir believe?" he asked. "I heard Sergeant Zetos make mention of him. I was his mentor, and as such he was amongst the Igniacs, acting as spiritual advisor to you, was he not?" "Yes, he was also my friend." "Indeed. But what did he believe? Whatever it was, he gave his life to see it done." "I witnessed miracles. The hand of Vulcan at my shoulder." "I have no doubt of that. Vulcan's blood burns strongly in you, Numeon. But what did Varkir believe?" Numeon's expression darkened, but he refused to allow his doubts to resurface. "He believed that Vulcan was dead, and here on Nocturne he would find peace." "And you don't believe that?" "Vulcan must rise." "For him or for you, brother?" Numeon scowled and found his anger rising. "For the Legion, for all of us, for the war." "And if, despite your beliefs, he returns to the mountain and does not rise, what then?" I don't understand. Ritan smiled sadly. No, I don't think you do. Is there anything further? Said Numeon, his anger turning into belligerence. Deathfire awaits. Shaking his head, gave Numeon his leave. Smoke rose from the dormant caldera of Mount Deathfire. A low rumble persisted in the depths, beneath a sharp refrain of crackling magma and the slow dissolution of rock, as if the mountain itself were in mourning. Ash and cinder gathered in the wide, craggy basin where the sons of Vulcan had mustered in solemn ranks. They bore their drake-hide cloaks proudly, the mantles fluttering in the hot, sulphurous breeze,